So, Catherine, this show, I loved the concept right from the start. It's a twist on who grabs the sword. A woman gets it. She's a goddess, a queen, a warrior. What drew you to this project? Was that a huge part of it?
I mean, yeah, everything you just mentioned. Growing up a fan of fantasy and also a fan of history. I mean, the Arthurian legends, whether you're a fan of either of those things or not, it's something that's just so familiar and ingrained within our literature and our folklore. But it's also something where, we hear that and we think of King Arthur and Merlin and the Knights of the Round Table, and we're very familiar with the male characters, but we very seldom, if ever, dive into the stories of the women. Particularly, the prolific and powerful Lady of the Lake, who is such an icon in the Arthurian legends. We really know very little to nothing about her. So to be able to have the opportunity to tell her story, but I think also place a woman at the epicenter of this legendary tale, it just feels so timely, and it was such an exciting opportunity to be a part of.
So as a fan of fantasy, how did you feel about getting to wield the sword and get the makeup and everything? Was that a lot of fun?
I loved it. Yeah, my inner nerd for sure, or my inner child was thriving. And quite often Tom Wheeler and we would kind of go off the side to set and just be like, this is so cool. Because it's so amazing to be able to do this as a job. But also I have to say it was an incredible learning experience because, as a fan of these genres, we often see these amazing epic pieces, and I think with the popularity of them in the past couple of years or past decade, the bar is set so high. And being a part of telling this kind of story, it really opened my eyes to see just how much work it takes, not just in terms of, time and rehearsing and putting the acting together, but also the fact that, you've got to learn a vast skill set in a short period of time. You shoot for a year and I can't get injured and I can't get sick. And we're moving to locations. I think my driver, Zen, who's incredible, one of the toughest days we had is when he picked me up in England, or UK, in England, the big country, in London. Sorry, that was quite broad. But he picked me up from London at 3:45 in the morning so we could get to Wales. And then we shot a whole day and finished the day. And it was those kinds of things and that kind of teamwork which just really impressed me. And I'm so proud of everyone on this.
What was it like? I mean, the show's all about who can grab that sword. What was it like for you the first time you did it?
It was really interesting, actually, because like I said, everything that you see on this is made by hand. It's custom made, including the weapons. And when I was first trying out swords, there was a lot of debate. This is the sword of power. How do we, how big is it? What does it look like? What is on it? And the armorer was handing me okay, so this is Russell Crowe's sword from this thing, and this is Chris Pine's from this thing, and this is Timothy Chalamet's. And it was a moment where I kind of I can't remember if it was me or someone else went one day someone's gonna be like, oh, this is Catherine's sword, a woman's sword. He is this person's sword playing a queen, because I'd only been picking up swords of kings and knights and all that kind of thing. So to just have that and feel the power of I don't know, just being a heroine and being able to, be a vessel for that story for a woman, it felt very inspiring.
I mean, and watching the show, that is one thing I kept thinking is, on the one hand, it's this fantastical world, and I think it will give people a bit of a mental escape that they need right now. But then on the other hand, it does deal with these issues that are still all around us about people being ostracized for who they are. And I wondered how much you thought about that when selecting the project and when filming it, and how much you're kind of reflecting on the timing of its release right now.
Well, I signed on very early, and it was because I loved the story. And it was funny because I wasn't necessarily looking to do a TV series, because they're gargantuan projects. But I knew that it had to be something right, and this just felt so right. And I think it's been interesting because as we were telling the story, we were aware that, we want this world to feel relevant and be true to what it is. And I think some of the best fantasy is able to be relevant, but also be an escape. And I think now more than ever, Curse kind of fits that box because of the social consciousness and because of the discussions that we're having all over the world.
So you love fantasy. I don't know if you loved, shows like, of course, Game of Thrones, Witcher. Were you fans of those? And do you think that this show will give that audience a craving filled?
I am. I'm such a fan of fantasy. Having now met Frank Miller, who is like an absolute legend, and also Tom Wheeler, I don't know how to call myself a nerd now, because they are just on such, and I say that with the most respect that I could possibly garner. They know that world so well, and I'm just a humble lover and enjoyer of that genre. But I say that that includes Game of Thrones, that includes Lord of the Rings, all of that I've really loved. And it's interesting because I think while we were filming it and while people were even trying to describe it, it's actually quite difficult, because when you think of each of those really memorable, epic, sort of fantastical pieces, they all really have their own stamp on what that is and what their story is. And I think Cursed, in a similar way, it's hard to describe because it also has its own stamp on what this story is. It's very fantastical and thriller and action-packed, but it's also really grounded and rooted and magical. So it will be interesting to see how people compare it, if they compare it, or just how people will respond to it.
Yeah. I mean, this show is very different than other projects that you've done. What was it like to figure out how to ride horses the right way, how to wield the sword in a dress, all that training, and maybe what was the hardest part of it?
Well, I'm a former athlete. I trained as a swimmer for nearly 10 years. And so I was really excited to dive into this and to use my body for a role, because I'd never done that before.
I like how you said dive in.
Dive in, yeah. Thank you, appreciate that. But quite literally dive in. And I think you always wish you had more time with these things, and I would love to, explore those areas and those skills more, because they require so much training. But I was really excited to get headfirst into that, and I enjoy kind of throwing myself into the physical element of the show. And it was we had, I think, 4 weeks before the show started. And then it was kind of like, okay, you're on your own. And as soon as we started filming, we just went until we stopped, basically. And I think, there were different challenges within filming. There are always challenges whenever you shoot anything, but this was such an epic and grand scale. And we were also doing it for such a long time. We were supposed to have hiatuses or breaks, and we had no breaks. We went 10 months straight through. And I think that is such a testament to the crew and to the cast, because we really needed to work together. And I'm trying to think of like the hardest day on set, but even when I think about like the hardest day on set, it was still really cool. And if it was challenging, it was just something that we all bonded over and later became funny. But if I had to say, I'd probably say one of Nimwe's most epic fight scenes, which we shot on the hottest day the UK has ever had, which was, I think, 44 degrees, and then, which is, I don't know, like 101, 105. And then we were under lights. I was wearing 3 layers of leather, and everyone else was basically wearing red blankets. And it was just like, and it was wasp season. So I would like roll around in fake blood. And then someone's job after every take was to pick the wasps off of my costume. Which sounds crazy. Look, it sounds crazy, but it was actually a lot of fun. And we all really pulled together. So
the finale, what was your reaction when you read that finale script, and what would you tease for fans about what's to come for those characters in upcoming seasons?
I mean, firstly, I feel like we just have to say I'm just so excited, and I know everyone is, just to let this, out into the world. And we're really, we worked so hard on this first season that I think we just really excited for everyone to see this first season. But I'd say it ends on a cliffhanger for a lot of the characters, figuratively and literally. And I think we've only really just seen the tip of the iceberg. These Arthurian legends are so grand, and I feel like in a way it's just the start of very many journeys. I don't know. I don't quite know how to tease it without ruining it for people.